I think Grave is so stupid. The moment that she pinned you to the wall, I'd be like, I'll just tell you whatever you want to know. It's so dumb that he's like, what are you talking about? Oh, I have gold. Look at her. She looks like death herself. Do you really think that you're going to get out of this?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are covering Crown of Midnight, chapters 27 through 35. And before we get started, let us first have a moment of silence for our fallen princess, who died way too soon.
I'm not
honestly.
okay.
I know. Okay. I was not anticipating her to die as quickly as she did.
I know. And in the middle of the book, too. You would think that would be like an end of book thing, but no. Middle of
Well, I wanted to know what she knew, you know?
I know.
And for her to die means that whatever she knew dies with her. So.
Or does it? I mean, who knows? Maybe she told more. Maybe she left a letter for Celaena or something. Maybe she told Archer. Because we know of her relationship to the...
Oh, yeah, that's true.
To the movement. I have a feeling she's gone, but not forgotten, and that she's going to come up in some way or another.
That's probably true. You're right.
Yeah.
I guess we'll see. As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters 27 through 35 specifically, but it is likely that references to the first book, Throne of Glass, will come up as well. If you haven't started TOG and you don't want any spoilers, then please pause here and come back when you're caught up. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. But you will be getting plenty of unhinged theories, so beware. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations, explicit language, or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. Next week's Crown of Midnight episode will cover chapters 36 through 41. In addition, if you love House of the Dragon, then we have got you covered. We are continuing to do weekly reviews for each episode in season 2. And finally, Addison, where are we at with the Onyx Storm countdown?
All right. Today, the day we're recording this, it is June 24th, and there are 211 days until Onyx Storm is released.
Yay!
Yay! It's getting close enough to where I might start rereading the series in what little infinitesimal amount of spare time I have just to start ramping up. But it may be a little too soon. I don't know. We're really only like 6 months away.
That's true. All right. That is all for our housekeeping. So on to the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries. Then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments. Also, if you enjoy the podcast and you'd like to support the show, please follow and subscribe. This way you'll always be up to date when new episodes drop, and it helps our rating on the podcast platforms so we can grow and find other book lovers who want to read with us. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Of course. Chapter 27. Celaena awakes in Chaol's bed only to find that he is gone. Presuming he has gone to tend to his duties as captain of the guard, Celaena thinks nothing of it. Celaena's day proceeds as normal, but as the evening wears on, she realizes that something is wrong. Very wrong. She runs to Chaol's room and finds a sealed note with details and instructions from Chaol's kidnappers regarding his whereabouts. As the day wears on, Chaol is in and out of consciousness. Although battered and bruised, he is okay for the most part. Chaol overhears two of the cloaked figures arguing about when she will show up. With a sinking feeling, he realizes the only she they could be referring to is Celaena. Chaol threatens the hooded figures and warns them they have made a huge mistake and that they have no idea what hell they're about to be in for. Chapter 28. Celaena makes her way through Rifthold into the warehouse where they are holding Chaol hostage. She arrives and flies through the window, daggers already flying. After all, dramatic entrances are practically her art form. Chaos ensues. Men start yelling and daggers and arrows start flying. Just as the bloodshed is about to continue, one of the leaders of the group orders everyone to stop. The chaos ceases for only a few heartbeats before Celaena baits the guard with the twin swords into another fight. As they begin to duel, an archer fires an arrow straight at Celaena. None other than Archer Finn dives in front of Celaena and takes the arrow to the shoulder. Archer begs Celaena to let him explain, and she gives him just one sentence to convince her not to kill them all. And then Archer hits us all with a bomb. He tells Celaena that he has been working with Nehemia for the past 6 months. What? Celaena's immediate reaction is disbelief, but the pieces quickly begin to fall into place, and Celaena realizes that Archer is telling the truth. As if things couldn't get any worse for Celaena, Archer then accuses Chaol of being complicit in the schemes against Nehemia. Chaol begins arguing with Archer, and Archer tells Celaena that his spy discovered that they wouldn't just be questioning Nehemia. Before Archer or Chaol can explain any more, Celaena simply repeats the same question. Where is Nehemia? Instead of answering, Archer tells Celaena he is sorry, and Celaena takes off running. Chapter 29. Celaena ran and ran and ran, all the while repeatedly chanting the mantra, not again, not again. Celaena makes her way through the city and into the castle, all the while making a plan to keep Nehemia safe and destroy whoever was sent to hurt Nehemia. But when Celaena arrives, it is too late. Nehemia is dead. No!
No, I know. So sad.
I know. Chapter 30. Nehemia was gone. That vibrant, fierce, loving soul, the princess who had been called the light of Eelway, the woman who had been a beacon of hope, just like that, as if she was no more than a wisp of candlelight, she was gone. Celaena stares in shock at Nehemia's horribly mutilated body. Dorian tries to reach her, but she's too far gone. It is only when the realization hits her that Chaol had known they were going to do this that she snaps out of it and launches herself at him. Celaena quickly gets the upper hand and has Chaol pinned to the floor. She takes out her dagger and plunges it towards his heart. For what seems like an eternity, they stay in this position. Celaena struggling to plunge the dagger down further, and Chaol struggling to hold her arm steady. Just as the dagger plunges down towards the point of no return, Celaena is stopped by an invisible force that could only be Dorian's magic. This distracts Celaena long enough for Rest to knock her unconscious, and Celaena falls. Chapter 31. Chaol takes Celaena to the castle dungeons, and Dorian accompanies him. Chaol then tells Dorian everything that had happened leading up to the discovery of Nehemia. Dorian insists that his father wasn't behind Nehemia's murder, and they speculate on who could be behind this, specifically noting whoever did this got some kind of sick delight from it. Dorian asks Chaol how long he will keep Celaena in the dungeons, and he responds with, as long as it takes. Celaena awakes in the dungeons. She and Celaena have a brief and strange conversation where she tells Celaena she has been given a choice: marry the Duke or rot in the dungeons for the rest of her life. Celaena warns Celaena that the water is drugged with a sedative. Celaena simply responds with, good, and drains the glass. Rest updates Chaol on Celaena's condition, and it is bleak. Chaol decides to take Celaena out of the dungeons and back to her bedroom, and has the heartbreaking realization that he had lost her, and she would never in 1,000 lifetimes let him in again. Chapter 32. Celaena awakes in bed, and all the memories come flooding back. Nehemia is dead, and she couldn't stop it. Nehemia's last words to her, you are nothing more than a coward. Unable to escape the never-ending thoughts, Celaena sinks further into her depression and doesn't get out of bed that day. Or the next. Or the next. Chapter 33. We are transported to the mines of Calcutta, where we get the perspective of an unknown slave girl. She has survived 6 months, longer than any other slave, or so she's told. The rest of her family didn't last even a month. Despite the tragedy she's endured and the horrible conditions she faces, she holds on to hope because of one thing: Princess Nehemia. When she learns that her only hope is dead, she loses control and swings her axe into the overseer's gut. Chapter 34. Rest updates Chaol on Celaena's condition. Not much has changed, except now instead of laying in bed, Celaena sits in a chair, but she still speaks to no one. In the wake of Nehemia's death, the king summons all of the southern lords to the glass castle to help manage the fallout. Dorian remarks on how surprisingly helpful and supportive Roland has been in the ever more chaotic council meetings. As he sits in his chambers, he remarks on the last time his magic stirred and saved his best friend's life. Dorian is desperate to try and learn control of his magic and tries with all his might to move a pen, but is unsuccessful. A different day, but the same chair, Celaena stares into the fireplace, turning the details of Nehemia's death over and over in her mind. It comes to her with stunning clarity. There was only one person who took that kind of sick delight in torturing their victims. Only one person who knew the castle and knew it well. Celaena Sardothian stood from her chair, knowing who she had to find. Grave. Chapter 35. Celaena formulates a plan. Because Chaol had all of her weapons removed from her room, her first stop is Celaena's tomb. Despite Mort's warnings and protests, Celaena takes Damaris and a handful of gold and jewels from the tomb. Celaena stealthily leaves the castle and makes her way to the seedy underbelly of Rifthold. Once there, she asks the barkeep for information on Grave's whereabouts. We switch perspectives and are privy to the despicable mind of Grave. Grave runs for his life as Celaena pursues him. He unknowingly cages himself in a dead-end alley. He tries to attack first, but Celaena dodges him with maddening ease. Celaena easily disables him and pins him to the wall with daggers. She then demands answers, and Grave tries to feign innocence, but his resolve quickly dissipates as Celaena continues her torture. As Celaena begins to cut off his thumb, Grave says he will tell her everything. And that's it. That's where we leave off.
Wow.
I know. A little bit of cliffhanger there. Sorry, guys.
I know. I did like that there was more action in this set of chapters.
Oh my
It
gosh,
was interesting to actually see them go do things outside of the castle.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was basically all action. It's just one action sequence after another, which is cool.
All right. Thank you for those summaries, Addison. Now let's dive into our analysis. Chapter 27. We begin this chapter with Celaena awakening to find that Chaol is missing. And Nehemia also does not show for her word marks lesson in the morning. She initially doesn't really think much of this, so she goes about her day as usual. Over breakfast, she receives a coded list of new names from Archer. So after that, she spends the rest of the day stalking and spying on these new people. Eventually, later in the day, Chaol still has not returned, and because it's now 10 p.m. by this point, she decides that she's going to go to his room. As she hurries through the halls, Celaena begins to get increasingly more worried, and she starts to recall the night that Sam died. She remembers that though Sam had been her equal, he had still been captured and killed by Rorik Farron as a way to get back at Celaena. She then really starts to panic at the thought of Chaol facing a similar fate as Sam. When she arrives at Chaol's room, she finds a red sealed note on the door side table addressed to her, and the first line of this note reads, "We have the captain. When you're tired of stalking us, come find us here." So immediately just based off of that, we know that these are members of the rebel group, right? Because that's who she's been stalking this entire time. The note also specifies that she is to bring no one and arrive by morning time at the warehouse address listed, or they will kill Chaol.
No!
I know. Not on her watch. As she reads that note, icy rage overtakes Celaena, and all of her carefully boxed up restraints finally crack. We already know Celaena is about to go apeshit on these nabbers. And the specific quote that I thought was important was, "An icy, endless rage swept through her, wiping away everything except the plan that she could see with brutal clarity. The killing calm," Arabin Hamill had once called it. Icy rage.
That's such a good description. Like when you read that, you get goosebumps. You're like, oh shit, they really fucked up.
Yeah.
They have no idea.
Right. And that icy part in particular sounds so familiar to Dorian. We know that they both have magic at this point, but I wasn't really sure if their magic manifested in the same way. But a lot of the descriptions of Celaena's kind of seem similar, or at least the way that the magic is initiated. You know what I mean?
Well, we actually don't know for sure that she has magic. It's heavily implied that she had she had powers at one point, right? But you have to remember magic is gone. And there are also powers outside of magic. And so technically, we use the term magic to describe Dorian's situation, but that has a lot of confusing space to navigate because we know there's word marks, there's power outside of magic. Magic is technically gone, so how could Dorian have magic? So we know that Celaena has the remnants of some kind of power. Okay. But it's possible that whatever well of power Dorian has, Celaena potentially could have, because you're right. I think the descriptions are very evocative of each other.
Okay, that's right. I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
You're just so excited for her to have magic.
Yeah. Because you know she does. It's just you're waiting for the specific info about what it actually is, but it's somewhere on the spectrum, right, of magic.
Yeah.
So
well, I have bad news for you. There's 5 more books to go, so it could be a while before we get there.
That's true. Hopefully we get something at least by the end of this book, because I'm tired of waiting. I want to know. So next we shift perspectives, and this time it's our captain of the guard, Chaol. He wakes up chained to a stone wall in what we presume is some dingy room inside this warehouse. Through Chaol's thoughts, we learn a few notable pieces of information about the captors. So the men that captured him wear long robes and masks to conceal their identities, and they are definitely not afraid to throw some punches. Kale realizes that they are waiting for something, and the fact that they hadn't killed him yet suggested that it was likely for what he believes to be some kind of ransom. He overhears a couple of the guards mentioning she will show up, and Kale pieces together that they are likely referring to Celaena. Most importantly, Kale thinks maybe it was a rebel group seeking to blackmail the king. He'd heard of nobility being captured for that reason and heard the king himself order the rebels to kill the petty lord or lady because he would not yield to traitorous filth. I was a little bit confused by that quote. I don't know if you have any insight or an interpretation of what that was, but
oh yeah, I got you. Okay. So you know how in every classic American film where the president's like, we don't negotiate with terrorists, that's like the line.
Okay.
It's like that, right? So if you're a rebel and you're like, oh, we're going to kill Duke Parrington if you don't do XYZ, the king is like, well, then kill him. I don't give a shit. Go ahead. I'm not going to negotiate with you. And so he's not necessarily giving them orders to kill them, but he's telling them that he doesn't care if he kills them. It is worded a little confusingly, but that's what they mean. So it's a way of him to show strength, I guess, to the rebels, that they can't manipulate him simply by stealing the lord of wherever the fuck, because he don't care.
He don't care.
He don't care. Not even a little bit.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyways, as Kale's listening to the guards conversing and he pieces together that they're referring to Celaena, he steps in and says, you so much as touch her and I'll gut you. The captors and guards that are watching him aren't really that fazed by Chaol, honestly. They are like, it's none of your business, Captain. Keep your mouth shut, or we're going to cut out your filthy royal tongue. And it's kind of through that line, Chaol realizes that they are A, not a fan of royalty, and B, leads him to believe that they are more educated, perhaps, especially one man that Chaol refers to as the warrior was the one who had used language that suggested he had been schooled a little bit more.
Well, I picked up on him because of all of the people in the warehouse, there's only 3 of them that are mentioned specifically. There's Archer, who we know, the old guy who's kind of in charge, who remains nameless. And then this guy is specifically called out multiple times. So I actually put a note that I think we're going to see him again. Like he's going to become a named character. I don't think that's just a coincidence because he is described so specifically. The fact that Chaol even knows anything about him, because I had the same thing. He could tell he was a warrior by the way he was moved and because of the vocabulary that he used. Because he says something like, am I a coward or a pragmatist? And Chaol's like, only an educated person would know the word pragmatist. And so that made me feel also that he's more than just a follower. Like he's a highly trained, educated person who's involved in the movement. And it would seem likely that someone like that would rise into the higher ranks. So I have a feeling that we're going to run into them again and they'll become a named character.
Actually, you know what? I think both of them may come back to some extent.
Yes,
because that
I would
stuck
agree
out
with
to me
that.
too, about how the other guy has this ancient voice and you're kind of like,
Yes.
The use of the word ancient comes up in other contexts.
I know. It makes it sound so foreboding. Why can't you just say he sounded like an old man? You know what I mean?
He's powerful. I don't know.
Ooh.
So Chaol, of course, he's a little scared by this, but he puts on a front and he's very much fiercely defending Celaena and threatening to rip them apart if anything is going to happen to them, which I actually really loved because I was like, oh, I appreciate that Chaol does not falter in his belief in Celaena, despite being scared for his own safety in that moment.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to chapter 28. It's go time, baby. Celaena is consumed by rage, and the killer inside has honed in on one goal: get Chaol back and unleash herself literally on the people that nabbed her man. So we start off with Celaena. She's scouting along the rooftops around the warehouse. And first off, we learn that there are several people guarding Chaol. That alone was indicative of the fact that they know Celaena. Whoever organized this knew just how dangerous she is and was like, we got to post up because she's dangerous. Second,
well, I feel like they may have thought they knew what they were in for, but really they had no idea.
Yeah, those people didn't stand a chance, literally.
Not even. And Celaena points out that they make so many mistakes. Like there's no one guarding the roof. They're just really all posted up by the front door as if she's just going to walk up and be like, hi, I got the invitation to the party. You know, like,
right.
No.
That's not what's happening.
No.
And then second, we again get some descriptions that I felt were important to note. So as she's prowling the rooftops, it's noted that she was feeling the night around her. That was in quotes. And once she sees Chaol bruised and dirty through the window, she feels the ice in her gut spread through her veins. The feeling of the night part stuck out to me because it seems as if she was made for the night. There is sort of this calling to darkness that aligns well with Celaena in a way that goes beyond just the literal interpretation of night being a good time for somebody who is an assassin, right? And then, in addition, the description of ice and the emotion of rage and anger, as I stated earlier, aligns with the way that Dorian's well of power and magical outbursts are described in this book as well. Again, we're not really sure what that means for Celaena, but I'm just noting it because there may be a connection there.
I think you're right. That's a good parallel to draw because the few times that we've seen Dorian's magic, it's been brought out by really strong feelings and usually feelings of anger, right? He was angry after the council meeting when he punched the wall. He was angry-ish when he was thinking about Celaena and the library. And so it seems like specifically feelings of great anger awakened whatever well of power within him that it causes it to react. And I would think it's fair to say that Celaena is very angry right now.
Oh, she's pissed. She is not happy. So,
yeah.
So before our big action scene, Celaena thinks to herself, this time she wouldn't fail. And boy, was she right about that. She leaps through the window, and this is when we shift perspectives. This time we see that Chaol watches as Celaena breaks through the window. Immediately, she takes out two archers with daggers, and it's pretty much game over for the men in that room. Chaol also realizes he is observing someone completely different. This is not the Celaena he knows and loves. This is the, quote, lethal predator he'd expected to find in the mines. There was nothing human in her eyes, nothing remotely merciful. And this realization seems to fundamentally change Chaol's perspective of her, which I was a little bit like, boo, Chaol, accept her for who she is.
Yeah, I feel like there's this theme that's been hinted at, and it's probably going to continue coming up. In the beginning, this is who Chaol expected to find. He thought she was going to be this bloodthirsty, just cold, calculating, murderous psychopath, basically. And then over time, because she was so charming and sweet and genuine and all these good things, I think he was able to convince himself that that part of her wasn't real or that it wasn't as abrasive as it is. So I think him actually seeing that side of her is really jarring for him because for months now, basically the entire time he's known her, she's been this not sweet, simpering girl, but, you know, sweet and...
She was really humanized.
Yes, thank you. That's a much better way to describe her. And so I think him seeing her like this, he's like, whoa. And to be honest, he's probably a little freaked out. Even the person I love most in the world, if I saw them in there just throwing daggers and murdering people left and right, I'd be like, what the?
You know? It's because it's so just cold, calculated, and machine-like. Like she is just zoned in. Well, this is what I'm saying. It almost feels like, in the way that it's described, she really does seem to transform. Like when she goes assassin mode and becomes Otterland's assassin, it truly feels like she shifts into a totally different person.
Yeah.
And so I get what Chaol's saying, but she's also there for you.
Yeah.
She's rescuing your ass because you got kidnapped.
Yeah, because you were too stupid to prevent yourself from getting kidnapped. I will say I did like that one guard was like, for being captain of the guard, you really weren't that hard to get. And I was like,
right.
That's a fair point, actually.
Pretty much. Celaena continues decimating these men. And finally, the guard with the ancient voice, I believe, yells out, enough.
Enough.
We have enough enemies as it is. There are worse things out there to face. So, obviously, that's important because it ties into this idea that there is something larger, more nefarious, more evil than just the king. We don't know what it is, but even this rebel group seems to be aware of it.
Oh, see, I took it to mean they're talking about the king. Like,
Oh,
they have much bigger enemies to
that's true
face,
too.
aka the king and whatever he's planning, than each other.
Okay, that's fair. That probably makes more sense in this context.
You're just always looking for danger. You're looking for the worst case scenario.
Well, it's funny because literally in my notes, I said this confirms that this rebel group definitely has information about what the king has been doing, but I didn't read that. Instead, I said something completely different. Maybe they do know, but the king context makes way more sense. So
thank God you have me. Thank God you have me.
I need to just read my notes and stick with my script here.
That's so funny to me that you even wrote that. Oh my God.
Okay. We have two different things going on, right? And you know they're all going to tie together somehow, but they haven't done that yet. And so you have to remember, no, this plot is with this sequence. This plot is with this one over here. I can't merge them yet because I haven't gotten the connection.
I know, it is hard.
So, but moving on, this statement from the ancient man also does give Celaena some pause. And that man is described as having short cropped white hair and crystal clear gray eyes. Now, I'm not saying this means anything, but if I recall correctly, the other character that we've met that has gray eyes was Nox in TOG. Again, I don't really know what that means, but
okay,
they have the same eye color. And they do seem to always point out people's eye colors too, right? It's the color theory situation. So we'll just see if it ends up meaning anything.
Okay.
I didn't go on a tangent, a yapping tangent here. So
you're not going to speculate that that's really Nox's father?
No, I will not. Progress. Okay. Progress in my personal restraint.
Growth, baby.
Yes. This ancient man continues pleading with Celaena, and through her thoughts, she shares that she could feel the iron aggression rolling off the hooded guard in front of her. See how tightly, eagerly he clutched the hilts of his twin sword. My question for you, did you take this at face value as just evidence of how intense the environment is, or do you feel this loops into something related to Celaena's capabilities?
Like the way the guard is sitting? What do you mean?
How she notes how intensely she can feel this other guard's emotion.
Oh, I took that at face value just because she's so highly trained that she's hyper aware of her surroundings, and that includes verbal and nonverbal cues. And as she notes, this guy wants a fight. Like, he's itching for it, right? And so I think she's just hyper aware of her surroundings, as any good assassin would be in the midst of a very bloody battle where it's like 1 on 20. So she's got to know what's going on. And likely, I would assume too, he's the biggest threat to her. Everyone else seems kind of mediocre at best, but he actually, as even Chaol noted, seems trained. I imagine she can probably tell that just because he has this double swords crossed on his back too. That would also indicate some proficiency with weapons that probably the other people in the warehouse don't have. Not to mention, most of them took off running to hide, whereas this guy stood there and was like, yes, just give me an excuse. So all of those things combined, I think, probably alert her that, he's...
Yeah, that makes sense. So, of course, almost immediately, this other guard then charges at Celaena, and she jumps back into action, and she actually just shreds this guard. Really didn't take her much effort. And she only stops when she hears a familiar voice and a flash of golden brown hair collide with an arrow that had been shooting toward her.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this man? Turns out it's Archer.
Oh, we knew he was sketchy. We
What
knew
the
he
hell
was
are
hiding
you
something.
here? I know.
Oh,
I know. I should have really stayed strong in this conviction that he was involved. Well, I don't know if I ever digress from that, but it makes
yeah.
sense that he was involved.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Celaena, of course, has the same thought. And we learned that Archer was not only a part of this group and set her up through Chaos capture, but he had also been working with Nehemia this whole time.
Yes.
So we have Archer's direct quote, and he says, Nehemia and I have been leading this movement together. She came here to organize us, to assemble a group that could go into Terrason and start gathering forces against the king, and to uncover what the king truly plans to do in Aurelia. So obviously, this clears up a couple things about Nehemia. We learned that Nehemia was working with the Terrason rebel group by giving them information about the movements of the king and also whatever she learned via Celaena. And then we can now understand why Nehemia had been being so weird with Celaena. I don't think that this was the only thing, but I think it was a large portion of why she was so elusive in the way that she described different things.
I agree. Well, and it definitely confirms, I think it's in the last set of chapters when she's talking to Celaena and wants to go back to Endovir because of Duke Parrington, everything that's going on there. And she's like, but there are things here, things in Rifthold I must do.
Yes.
And we were like, what is that? Well, it's pretty clear. Celaena puts a lot of pieces together in her mind about Nehemia's behavior, which I thought was interesting to note because we speculated about all these bits and pieces. And so the text says, and then she remember how Nehemia convinced her not to look into the riddle she'd found in Davis's office and had been so slow and forgetful about the promise to research the riddle. Remembered the night Dorian had come to her rooms because Nehemia had been out and he hadn't been able to find her anywhere in the castle. Remembered Nehemia's words to her right before their fight about how she had important matters in Rifthold to look after, things as important as Eelway. And so all of that is things we already knew, but I like it because it's a very succinct way to pull all that together. So it's a big revelation and an aha moment for Celaena, but also us as readers.
But again, it still does leave you wondering, why didn't Nehemia just tell her about these things? I still want to know why she wouldn't let her know about word marks. If it would be beneficial to convincing Celaena to join the cause, right? Because that was Nehemia's goal, was to try to push her and coax her into thinking about the bigger picture here.
I think a couple things. So first, obviously, we don't know what Nehemia's intentions and motivations are in the grand scheme of things, right? The second thing is that right before all of this goes down, Nehemia and Celaena have that big fight. And it's because Nehemia is really pushing her to take action and to actually do something against the King of Adarlan. I feel that in hindsight now, with the context of what has occurred, it seems pretty obvious to me that was Nehemia testing the waters with Celaena to see where she was on the spectrum of take no action. Okay, I'm ready. Let's go to war. And Celaena reacted very, very badly to that. I mean, literally told Nehemia, you're crazy, basically. This is what you're going to do, I want no part of it. And so I feel that perhaps Nehemia would have revealed all that information to her had Celaena been more receptive to even the idea of doing anything against the King of Adarlan, but she's so reactive in a negative way that I feel like that probably has Nehemia pulled back. But then the flip side is, to your point, telling her that may have motivated her. But I wonder too, we don't really know how much Nehemia actually knows about the word mark situation in relation to the king. We know she knows what word marks are. We know that she has access to probably the same stuff the rebels do, but it's unclear whether she knows anything more than what the rebels know. And it doesn't really seem like they have figured out what the king's plan is. It's kind of confusing to navigate because we really don't know what Nehemia knows in its entirety. I don't know. My impression is that she held back because Celaena wasn't ready to hear it.
That's true. But Celaena had already been curious about the word marks specifically and the eye and everything. And I feel like just informing her about that would have been a better entry point than the way Nehemia started, which was the king's evil. We're going to attack him, blah, blah,
Right.
blah. So I agree with your point. She was testing to see how Celaena would react. But I think had she started with something way smaller and more relevant to what Celaena was already interested in, it would have easily pushed her into continuing to explore that, because then she follows it. She realizes, oh, the king can use word marks too. Why? Oh, now I got to find out what's going on with the king. And it'll just snowball on its own. So maybe really that's more of a frustration about Nehemia and how she went about this, but
dude, for real. I'm really hoping we are going to get some kind of post-mortem communication with Nehemia via letter or a message she gave to someone to give to Celaena, where Nehemia explains pretty much everything she knew and why she did what she did and why she behaved the way that she did. I don't know for sure we're going to get that, but that's what I'm hoping, because I don't feel like Sarah J. Maas would leave Nehemia's storyline with Celaena the way things are now. Because from a relationship perspective, Nehemia's last words to Celaena were, "You're a coward," right? Yeah. That's devastating. And Celaena is obviously broken by the fact that their last words were said in anger. And it just doesn't seem like it would be good closure for readers to leave everything off that way. So I really do feel that we're going to get some kind of closure in terms of information and also healing for the relationship.
Maybe it'll be in the same way that she's been communicating with Elena. Like it'll be in like a spiritual forum. Like
I did wonder that.
The in-between.
So that would be cool. So maybe Nehemia is not really totally gone.
She's not totally dead. She's just in the spirit world.
Oh no, she's totally dead. She's just not totally gone.
But her
spirit,
her essence, her essence of life is not totally dead.
I was like, no, I'm pretty sure
her body is dead.
I'm pretty sure Nehemia is not going to come back from that.
Yes. So now, while it's good that we get confirmation about Nehemia, it's not looking so great for our Captain Chaol. Archer goes on to shed light on the fact that Chaol has known for over a week that there was a threat made up to Nehemia's life, though they don't know who made the threat either. But more importantly, the discussion leads to Celaena's realization that Nehemia has stayed behind at the castle and that it may be too late to save her from the threat that is supposed to be occurring that very night.
No.
Celaena obviously has suspicions raised about Chaol, but she doesn't have time for that right now because our girl needs to get back to the castle pronto.
ASAP. Faster than any human has ever run before. All right, so for chapter 29, Celaena takes off running, and she is running for her life. Well, I guess she's really running for Nehemia's life, but you get my point. So there's this really vivid description of just how fast she is running, and she's having all of these kind of flashes of memories of not again. It's very evocative of when she lost Sam. So Celaena is just in an absolute panic. There was something interesting in the description of when she's running, and it says she could have sworn she heard hooves thundering after her, but there was nothing in the world except her and the distance to Nehemia. So I keyed in on that because this is not the first time that we've gotten a description in a period of great stress for Celaena of hooves thundering after her. And so I actually got up my handy dandy ebook, searched this phrase, and it actually comes up twice in Throne of Glass. In the ebook, it's page 280. So she's having a conversation with Nehemia where Nehemia is hinting that she suspects that there's something up with Lily and Gordana, but it has not been revealed. This is before the final duel and everything. And the quote is, "An inky black crept into the corner of her memory and she struggled against it. There are parts of me that I... ... And then it's a description of what's happening in her mind. She heard it then, the sound that haunted her dreams, hooves pounding, thunderous hooves." So that's the first reference to that. Then later, we get a lot more clarity and a better description of what it is about. In the ebook, it's page 386 of Throne of Glass, towards the end of chapter 45. And the description is, thundering hooves beat the frozen ground faster and faster as the rider whipped the horse. And this is when she is having a nightmare. She's running towards a bridge and she's like, she must reach the bridge. It couldn't cross the bridge. And it's a very vague dream in a way, as much as it is detailed. When we had covered that chapter in third class, Celaena and I heavily speculated that this was about the night that her parents were killed and that Terrason was invaded. And this is a recollection of when she was trying to escape. We're presuming whoever killed her parents was continuing to try to kill her, and this is all about her escape. So that would align with inciting with a very traumatic event and would also align with what Celaena is experiencing now. So I just thought that was interesting to note because it has come up a couple times. Honestly, I don't think we're going to get the real story about what that is about until Assassin's Blade, or maybe even later. But I did think it was important to note because this is the third time of everything that we've read so far.
Yeah, I felt like this was a callback to her past experiences with the falling of Terrason, her family, and maybe events with Sam as well. But in neither case, she's really scared that she's about to lose another person that she loves to this king. This freaking king.
I know. It's poor Celaena. She's experienced so much trauma. And she's only freaking, what, 18, 19?
18,
I don't even know if she's 19 yet. Yeah. But regardless, she continues running and she finally gets into the castle. And as she's almost in Nehemia's room, she passes Dorian, who's talking to some guards. And Dorian immediately begins chasing after her. I think he can tell that Celaena is in a state of panic. So she makes her way to Nehemia's room. And during this time, while she's running, she's formulating her plan, right? She's like, I'm going to have Nehemia hide and that'll keep her safe. And then I'm going to take care of whoever's coming to kill her. And she's like, I'm going to destroy them. They're mine and mine alone. Like, she's bloodthirsty. And she goes into the room, but she's too late. There's blood everywhere. And she sees Nehemia's body on the bed.
Aww.
And she is long dead. There's no chance of any kind of heroic last-minute attempt to rescue her. I also thought it was interesting in a description when we're seeing Celaena standing there and looking at the horror before her. And it says, Celaena stood in the center of a freezing room. I only noted this because so far in any description when Dorian's magic is awakened, the temperature always drops. It's always described as it's freezing, a cold, a chill. So I just thought that was interesting because, as we just talked about in a previous chapter, is Celaena's magic well of power similar to Dorian's because of the way that it's described. And I feel this is very evocative of the way that Dorian's surroundings are described whenever his power is activated.
I agree. I had another quote from when she was sprinting up the stairs. So this was one of her thoughts. And she was saying, she was Otterland's assassin. She would not fail. The gods owed her. The word owed her. And I found that wording to be interesting because, again, there's a mentioning of the gods, and it's set up as a line that could be interpreted either at face value or as a reference to something about her abilities or her past, or maybe even foreshadowing of something to come later. Because what do the gods owe her for? Is she referring to just her general trauma that she's experienced, or is there something more specific going on?
That's how I took it. It's just that her parents were murdered. She woke up covered in their blood. Her best friend and first love was murdered. She was taken to Doir and beat mercilessly. All of those things, I would say, like, the word owes her, the gods owe her. She's experienced a lot of trauma. So that's how I took it.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So I have to ask you a question because something about Nehemia's death does not sit right with me. We know that Grave is the one who killed her. Okay, that's revealed in the very last chapter of this set. He's a relatively talented assassin. Sure, he did make it to the final four. First of all, Nehemia is a highly trained warrior. Secondly, Nehemia had guards, and it's said in this chapter that the guards are also killed. I would imagine the guards of the Princess of Ilway are also extremely highly trained, right? So how was Grave able to disarm, kill all of them? Not to mention, Nehemia can use fucking word marks. So there's no way that she could use some kind of word mark to protect herself. And or would she not have word mark spells, whatever, protecting her room? Like something about it just doesn't seem right to me. It's too easy. Something about it just feels off to me. I would like an actual description of how Grave was able to fucking pull that off.
Yeah, I had a similar thought as well. I almost
Okay.
feel like maybe they were disarmed or something happened to quell them in a way that would prevent them from easily defending themselves.
Like maybe they were
Which
drugged or something.
drugged. They keep being like, it wasn't the king. Look, the king may not have done it himself, but I don't believe that he was not involved whatsoever.
Oh, see, I don't
I
think he was
think,
involved. I really don't. I think that's too obvious. It's easy for us as readers to be like, oh, the king had handed it. I really don't think he did, because I do believe that the king is genuine in that conversation with Chaol, where he's like, I don't want her dead because she'll make herself a martyr. And that's more likely to mobilize the rebels in Eelway. So I actually don't think it's beneficial to the king that Nehemia is dead. I mean, don't get me wrong. He didn't like Nehemia, but it doesn't actually benefit him strategically to have her dead.
that's true, but he also doesn't really seem to act like it's really a problem either. Because
Yeah.
he did want Nahimi out of the way. He just didn't want her to die in that particular way. I don't believe that the king himself did it, but I feel strongly that there's a connection to the king somehow in relation to
Yes.
Nehemiah's death. But my thought process with that was maybe somebody else knows about word marks and they did something to her and stopped.
Mm,
You know what I mean? I don't know. So,
yeah, it's possible.
but it is weird. I agree. The circumstances of
Yeah.
how she was easily just killed by
Yeah.
Grave alone. Granted, Grave also had the element of surprise because she wasn't expecting anything to happen right now, but
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
true. It just, something about it just doesn't sit right with me. So I hope Celaena's tracking down of Grave and getting the answer she needs from him, that gets revealed to us.
Yes, yeah, I want to know everything that he confessed.
But Demi is dead. That concludes the end of part 1 of Crown of Midnight. I did have a question for you, because the next part is obviously part 2, and it's titled The Queen's Arrow. So I wanted to know if you had any speculation on what the title of this part means.
I'm wondering if it was related either Queen Elena as
Yeah.
queen or Celaena was gifted a golden arrow at Yulemas.
Uh-huh.
And that
Yes.
was supposed to be symbolic of the huntress Deanna,
Mm-hmm.
who was known for her speed and swiftness and also as a protector and a
Yes.
huntress.
Yes. Okay, those were my
So,
exact notes. I literally wrote the queen could be Georgina or Elena. Those are the only 2 queens we know. Highly unlikely it has anything to do with Georgina, since she's not even
right.
in this book. So that leaves Elena. And then an arrow is obviously a weapon. But, it can be used descriptively, like she was as fast as an arrow or whatever. So I actually went back to my ebook just to double check about the goddess Deanna. So she's described in 2 ways: the goddess of the hunt and maidens, and also the huntress and protector of the young. And so I
So
did.
she's a goddess.
Mm-hmm.
Does this mean we could get an introduction to something? Like, is she going to be bestowed? Maybe she was literally bestowed at Yule Mass or Yule Miss. Sorry, not Yule Mass.
You'll my ass.
Yule Mass. Because I know it was supposed to be symbolic at Yule Miss when they were gifted
Mm-hmm.
with things. No one was really taking it as you're
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
getting a gift from the god, right? But what if somehow she was in some capacity?
yeah. Blessed in some way. It does
Mhm.
seem more likely given the title of this part. I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to be on the lookout for any reference to that. So if it just comes up randomly, oh well, you're welcome.
Yeah.
But I was just curious because it's a very specific name for the part.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. I
Okay.
guess we'll find out.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I wanted to ask you before you move on to chapter 30.
All right, moving on to chapter 30. As Selena looks at her surroundings and the state of Nehemia, her guards, the blood everywhere, she is absolutely stunned into silence. She starts to feel the strong emotion, and she notes that the ancient ageless drum, her heartbeat, pulls through her ears, drowning out any sound. And again, there's that word ancient. I kind of felt like that description was perhaps an unlocking, so to speak, a part of Celena's layering that has prevented her from embracing her true identity. Because
Okay.
previous chapters, we knew that some princess and some queen, they were unnamed in chapter
Mm-hmm.
25, but they were having a conversation about how something needed to happen to get presumably Celaena to act. And so I felt like this was perhaps part of that. Maybe Celaena doesn't realize it yet, but could be. Through her other thoughts, we also learn that Celaena feels incredibly guilty that she hadn't been there for Nehemia when she needed her most. As she's having these thoughts, Dorian approaches, and it's clear he's also really heartbroken by this because he's crying. She also hears Chaol's voice in the background, and that really pisses her off as the initial shock starts to wear off and the reality of the situation sinks in. So her thought was they had done this. They had betrayed her, betrayed Nehemia. Then she also remembers what Archer had said about Chaol knowing what was happening to Nehemia, and she just loses it.
Loses her shit.
She goes crazy. So
Mm-hmm.
this is all happening very quickly. Celaena charges at Chaol and she gouges him with her fingernails in the face, which I thought was wild because, I mean,
That
some
hurt.
strong fingernails. But, anyways, they engage in this back and forth as Chaol attempts to calm her and also defend himself. Through this, we see Chaol's realization that he has truly lost Celaena now. There is no turning back from this, and she is completely blinded by rage. Eventually, Celaena does get the upper hand. She is able to maneuver a dagger, and she attempts to stab him in the chest. Chaol manages to hold her off, and he really continues to plead with her, saying, "Celaena, I am your friend." And this is when we get a pretty heartbreaking line.
Huh.
She shouts at him, "You will never be my friend. You will always be my enemy." And then she breaks through his hold. And I mean, we're all convinced here that she's really going to kill
Mm-hmm.
Chaol. It
Oh,
seemed very likely.
I honestly did not know how they're going to get out of that. I guess in the moment you forget that Dorian has magic, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, Nehemia and Chaol are both going to be dead. See, then, because the plot could have totally gone in that direction, right? She kills Chaol, she gets thrown in the dungeon. You really could see it going that way. And she does basically seem absolutely feral. So it seems
Yes.
not out of the realm of possibilities for her to follow through with it.
But luckily, then there was a sudden chill in the room, and Selena's hand just stopped, as though it had been frozen in midair. For a heartbeat, it seemed as if she was thrashing against some invisible force, but then Russ was behind her, and she was too busy struggling to notice as the guard slammed the pommel of his sword into her head. As Celaena fell atop him, this is Chaol, a part of Chaol fell along with her.
So heartbreaking.
I know. So it's not revealed to us until later that this was Dorian, but
Right.
obviously I was like, oh, that was for sure Dorian because I don't know,
Oh,
who else was it going to
absolutely.
be.
Well, the descriptor is there was a sudden chill in the room.
Yeah.
So again, just pointing out that anytime there's that description of power being used, I'm going to try to stop using the word magic because again, we may not be magic. We don't know. But that is pretty much, that's very consistent across the board.
Yeah. So I'll admit at first I was like, Chaol, you fool. But that was the emotional part of me just reacting and siding with Celaena. Of course, I obviously didn't want her to actually kill him. But then as I processed and I thought about the sequence of events, I realized it was really just a horrible tragedy. No one really could have prevented what was going to happen. The king was going to kill anyone if Celaena did find out and she intervened in any way. So Chaol couldn't tell Celaena about it because he didn't want to risk that. And then Chaol's kidnapped by a rebel group that has their own set of plans. So it's just two ships passing in the night and their separate plots interfere with being able to save Nehemia in this case.
Oh, I know. Because if you think about it, the rebels want to keep Nehemia safe. Chaol wants to keep Nehemia safe, and so does Celaena. And because the rebels want to keep her safe, they kidnap Chaol. So had they not kidnapped Chaol would have been in the castle. So maybe he could have done something, right? And then because Chaol's kidnapped, Celaena goes to save Chaol. Had that not happened, Celaena could have been in the castle, right? All of these things just aligned perfectly in the worst possible way to allow the circumstances that allowed Nehemia to be killed. And so it's just, it's a really heartbreaking series. It's a series of unfortunate events.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Lemony Snicket.
Yeah, thank you.
The wise series of Lemony Snicket.
I know. I love that book. I reread it as an adult. And I'm like, this series is weird as fuck, but I still like it.
I love that series. But anyways, point being, it was a whole mess. And unfortunately, the result was Nehemia dying.
I don't like your words.
And that ends chapter 30. So next, we have chapter 31. We start off this chapter with Dorian and Chaol bringing Celaena down into the prison cells. They put her in a cell next to Caltain's cell, and Dorian tries to give her a cloak to keep her warm, but Chaol says, I don't trust her with anything in there except hay, which I thought was pretty cold. I was like, Chaol, come on.
I don't think it's cold. I think it's smart as fuck. Celaena is insane. I don't mean like insane mentally, but like the shit that she can do after just witnessing what he had just witnessed. I wouldn't even trust her with hay. Okay. Seriously.
That's true. I don't like the treatment. I know that she is a deadly assassin, but that's not who she is at her core, okay? She was just reacting to very traumatic events.
Well, I also took it that I wonder if Chaol is worried that she'll hurt herself.
That could be it.
And so he doesn't want her to have a weapon for a multitude of reasons, let's say.
Yeah. I did think it was funny that before they walk out, Chaol warns Caltain not to interact with her, even though they put her in a cell right next to Caltain. I was like, what? What do you mean?
I took it more like he's like, just leave her alone. Don't bother her with your crazy nonsense.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But obviously they do have some words. So the two of them walk out, and Dorian is reflecting on how he had stopped Celaena and the general awfulness of what happened to Nehemia. Then, as they get to the stairs, Chaol just slumps down. And now it's time for the boys to finally have their heart-to-heart. So Chaol confides in Dorian about everything that happened with the threat to Nehemia, his kidnapping, and his realization that Chaol being instructed to keep Celaena away had really been code for the assassination taking place that night. He also tells Dorian that he couldn't believe how fast Celaena had been running. His quote was, I've never seen anyone run that fast, Dorian. I found a horse within seconds of her taking off, and she still outran me. Who can do that? This definitely serves as evidence that there was some kind of potential power or something going on with Celaena, because as we pointed out previously, maybe it's connected to Deanna the Huntress and the gift that had been bestowed upon her at Yulmis, or I don't know how, but something's going on.
It's otherworldly, non-human quickness. That's what I wrote in my notes. Or non-human. Okay, either or maybe both. But there is definitely something to that.
Dorian goes on to say he didn't believe his father was the one who did it because he had been dining with him just prior to finding Nehemia dead, and they both wonder who it could have been in that case. Finally, Dorian asks how long they will keep Celaena imprisoned, and Chaol says, as long as it takes for her to decide not to kill us all.
Very astute on Chaol's part. I gotta hand it to him. I feel like his head is in the right place.
I guess. Again, I don't like that she's captured again because she always ends up in prison.
Well, when you're Ireland's greatest assassin, that's what you get.
But she was
okay. It's only temporary. It's only for like a few days.
I know. In the next scene, Celaena awakens And she realizes that yet again, someone she loves has died, and she is now behind a prison door. Caltaine, interestingly enough, then initiates a conversation with her and asked if she killed anyone deserving. Celaena, of course, is unforgivably furious at Chaol for not warning her that the king planned to question Nehemia, but she also confirms what Dorian had speculated, and that she didn't feel it was the king either. Celaena informs Caltaine they killed Nehemia, and then Caltaine offers some interesting information as well. She says, Duke Parrington is going to Morth in 5 days, and I am to go with him. The king told me I can either marry him or rot down here for the rest of my life. Celaena questions why they'd say that, considering Caltaine had betrayed the Duke, but Caltaine simply says, who knows what games these people play and what ends they have in mind. And then she says, my headaches are worse, and those wings, and she kind of trails off. Celaena notes that Nehemia had also previously mentioned the wings, though she doesn't really have any clue what that means. She feels like Caltaine is mumbling some nonsense again. And their conversation ends with Caltaine asking Celaena to punish all of them someday. And Celaena, of course, agrees. Then Celaena looks at the glass of water. And despite Caltaine telling her that it is drugged with a sedative, Celaena just decides she's going to drink the whole thing because she doesn't want to feel her feelings.
Yeah. I pretty much had all the same takeaways that you did from that section of the chapter. I did have one quote that I thought was just more of a character note, but also it gave me very long-term foreshadowing vibes that made me a little nervous. It's after Celaena wakes up and everything comes crashing back to her that Nehemia is gone and everything that happened. She says, but death was her curse and her gift, and death had been her good friend these long, long years. I feel like on face value, she's experienced a lot of death. People she loves and care about have died. It's also her gift. She's Otto's greatest assassin. But I wonder if that is going to be a theme with Celaena, that as long as she uses her gift, she will continually be cursed, and that people around her that she loves and cares about will die. And I'm really worried that is going to be a continuing trend throughout the rest of this series. I don't know, just something about that line just really struck me.
Maybe that explains why she didn't want to face herself for so long. It's because what she actually has is something that's both powerful but also dangerous in a way. And
I don't know. I also wanted to ask you what you think is going on with the Duke and the King and Caltaine. Celaena's question is pretty spot on. Why would he want her as a wife? It doesn't make any sense to me. What is Caltaine's utility to them now?
I don't know. I was wondering the same thing, but I just don't have enough information to speculate it on this point because we don't know anything about the Duke.
Yeah, it's really
weird. He's barely mentioned. He's really only mentioned when he has like some brief conversation or if he's with the king, but we don't get any of the Duke's insights. We don't know what he's doing. So I don't really know. I tried to look up where Morth was on the map, but that didn't necessarily help me either because it just happens to be...
It's close to Eelway. That's why.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any speculation about that because I got nothing. I had absolutely nothing about it.
It is close to the Whitefang Mountains. And it's like the southernmost city before they get into Melisande as a territory, but it does border along the Whitefang Mountains. And we know that the king's been going to the Farian Gap. Chaol's family is from Aniel, and the Silver Lake is in that area too. I don't know. I really don't know. I just get a general bad feeling about that territory, though. Anything that's close to those mountains and the Farian Gap, I'm like...
And the witches. The Witch Kingdom and all that.
There. But aside from that, I have no idea.
Fair enough. I didn't really have any speculation either. I was hoping that you had done some incredible deep diving and you're like, I got you.
No, not in this case. I don't have enough information about him yet. All right. Moving on. After Celaena drinks the first round, it's presumed she is continuously doing this. It's been a few days and we get a brief description of this dream. And this is a dream that she had stated previously. It's where she's in the abyss. There's the forest on the other side. except now there's no stag present. And it appears that all the terrain around is crumbling. There's vicious wind, and she just hears the words, "You are nothing more than a coward," over and over again. When she wakes up from that dream, she just continues to drink the water. So she's going around in a little cycle. I felt maybe that's a little bit of foreshadowing for something as well, because this is that dream that she's had before, except this time there's no stag there. So
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that in that way.
yeah, it's that same dream that she had described again, but now it's different. It seems like there's no more hope in the dream now. Is kind of the sense that I was getting
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I think that
in a weird
aligns
way.
definitely with her experience and what's going on.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that means, but next we are now on the fourth day that she's been down in the prisons, and Ress is giving Chaol an update on Celaena, who has barely eaten anything and she's refused to speak to anybody. Chaol shares thoughts about how chaotic it had been in the castle since Nehemiah's death. He is shocked the king didn't fire him and notes that the king seemed smug and that he had barely looked surprised when informed of the situation with Celaena. All he'd said to him was to get her in line and left it at that. Chaol then picks Celaena up from the cell. We can tell that Chaol feels very guilty for what happened, and he then brings Celaena up to her rooms where Philippa is waiting, and he realizes he had lost her, and she would never in 1,000 lifetimes let him in again.
Oh, no. We did all that work for them to be together.
I know. We should have known. We were kind of right, though, that something was going to happen with the relationship. It was too good to be true, you know?
I know, but it just happened so quickly.
For now.
Like they were literally only together and happy for a week, literally 7 days.
I forget how short of a time it's been.
I
In my
know.
mind, it's been like months.
Years. Yeah, or at least a year. I know.
Yeah, very little time. That closes out chapter 31. Moving on to chapter 32. Celaena awakens in her bed, and it's pretty clear that she has gone into a spiral of depression, knowing Nehemia is dead, and as she remembers her last words to her, which were, "You are nothing more than a coward."
Devastating.
I know.
Devastating.
She also notices that the eye of Elena is warm against her skin, perhaps in a comforting or protective manner, but we don't get any information aside from that. Last but not least, Selena continues to feel guilty for her own desire to escape from her feelings and how this had caused her to miss Nehemiah's funeral. Of course, this doesn't help at all, and she continues in her depression as she refuses to get out of bed the next several days.
Seems like a very reasonable response also to your best friend being brutally murdered. You know, she's probably handling it better than I would. So,
Well, but she's also escaping though, because instead of actively processing it, she's just numbing, right? She's not
mhm.
really
Yeah,
trying to
denial.
figure out. Yeah, she's totally in a denial stage. And that's why she
Mhm.
sits there. She's lost hope and she's given up at this point.
I also, one of the things I liked from this chapter, which that sounds weird given the context, but there's a quote where Celaena is thinking about her relationship with Nehemia, and she says, Celaena had adored Nehemia from the moment she'd laid eyes on her, like they were twin souls who had last found each other, a soul friend. And I was like, oh God. To think that they're twin souls who last found each other after all this time, only for her to be ripped away. It just really digs in the knife and then twists, you know, and you're just like, your heart. So I just thought that
Yeah.
was a lovely description, but also absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chapter 33. This chapter was, first of all, also heart wrenching, in my opinion. And second,
Mm-hmm.
interesting to see a different perspective from people outside of the castle. Because pretty much
Mm-hmm.
everyone that we've met is involved in the glass castle somehow.
Or at least
And
Rifthold.
right, or Rifthold. And this time we are taken to the Calcula labor camp where a young girl reflects on the past 6 months she has spent in the mines. We learn that she is the last of her family still alive and that, quote, she'd been alone for 5.5 months now, alone, yet surrounded by thousands, which That line took me out when I read it at first because I can't imagine the loneliness and hopelessness the girl must have
Mhm.
felt. Right. And it's true.
Yes.
There's so many of them, and yet they can't really interact with each other because they're
Mhm.
always being guarded and forced to work constantly.
And it's so heartbreaking too, because can you imagine being in that scenario and also knowing even if you get out, everyone you love is dead? So
Mhm.
the fact that
Yeah.
she has the will to continue to survive, well, I mean, that's literally what this chapter is about, is
Mhm.
the driving force that keeps her going. Because if that were me, I'd be like, well, there's nothing left for me. What's the point? End it now. Because it's not even no family. It's like there's no home to go to. There's no country left. Everything you love, your sense of place, identity, friends, family, gone. So what's
Yeah.
the point? Revenge.
Yeah.
Revenge is literally the only thing left.
That is precisely what the girl does. So
Exactly.
she
Yeah.
she shares that her only hope after her family passed away had been the possibility of Princess Nehemia accomplishing her goal, but soon she heard the news of Nehemia's death. This totally breaks the girl, and her final thoughts are enough before she swings her axe into an overseer, thus also sealing her own death.
Mm.
But she goes out with the bang.
I just really
Mhm.
like this chapter. It's a nice
Yeah.
break in the pace of what is going on here. And like you
Yeah.
said earlier, it's a nice perspective shift. It's just really beautifully written. Because when you think
Mhm.
about it, somehow in the span of 2.5 pages, you get invested in this character who has no name, who you've never met, in a place you've never
Mhm.
been. And for a brief moment, you feel what she's feeling, right? And I think that's really challenging to do as an author. I like it because I think Nehemia was always talking about how her people suffer in Chaol and Dovir and things are just horrible. And I feel like a lot of times I'm like, yeah, I know it's horrible. And I was a little desensitized to that because Nehemia was always talking about it. In a way, that makes sense as a reader because you're not exposed to any of the horrors and the minds or any of the people. You don't have a connection to any of them. You're able
Mhm.
to otherize what's happening. So I like that Sarah J. Maas wrote this and brought it into a broader context where you feel and you understand at least a little bit of what it's like and what's going on in the camp. I love at the end where she's talking about how she names her list of the dead and then she adds her name before she
Yeah.
swings the axe. And that is just such impactful writing. I literally got goosebumps when I was reading it. I was like, oh my God. And so I actually had written a question like, what do you think the purpose of this chapter is? But I think I just answered my own question.
I pretty much had most of the same thoughts. I felt like it added an understanding of Nehemia and also showed us that Nehemia was really well loved by her people because that was this one girl's singular hope that Nehemia would be able to free
Hmm.
them. And Nehemia's death signaled the death of her own hope,
Hmm.
essentially, of this
Yeah.
girl's and likely most of the other people in the camp as well. So
Hmm.
I also felt it was really evocative of Nehemia's pleas to Celaena when she had
Hmm.
said, "When will it be enough, Alentia?"
Oh,
And
okay.
then this little girl realized that she had reached the end, like this was her enough, and then
Hmm.
it resulted in
Oh,
death. So,
that's a nice parallel. Good call out.
mhm.
Yeah. So I have to ask, do you think we'll ever learn the identity of and or meet this unknown slave girl? Do you think that maybe she actually escapes and survive, or do you think this is really just a way to give context for the suffering that's happening?
I think it's just contextual at this point.
Okay.
It seems pretty certain that she died because
Probably, but
well, I guess it doesn't confirm that, but it's implied that this was her
right. But
final
moments of her life. Yeah.
act before she basically sent herself on a suicide mission because
Yeah.
she knew that by attempting to kill the overseer that she was going to be killed
Right.
by
I was
the
just
other guards
curious.
as well. But
Yeah. I think
yeah,
you're probably right.
I don't foresee it becoming relevant later.
Mhm.
But as we talked about, I think it gives us an understanding of Nehemia because we had talked about this not necessarily as we were recording, but we were mentioning how we didn't really get to know Nehemia really well.
Right.
we weren't privy to her innermost thoughts. We only knew what she stood for as far as the cause goes and why she was in the castle. And we learn a little bit more about her through her conversations with Celaena. But so many of those conversations, at least towards the end of TOG and through this first half of Crown of Midnight, have been so serious. They've always been about getting Celaena to take part in stuff. And it really wasn't about getting to know Nehemia, I guess. But I thought this chapter added to developing a deeper understanding of what kind of person Nehemia was, because for everybody in the labor camp to use her as the hope to keep their spirits.
Yeah, their will to survive.
Yeah, their will to survive, exactly.
Okay, cool.
Chapter 34. We start off with Rest giving Chaol another Celaena update, though nothing really has changed for our girl. Apparently, she sits in the front of the fire all day. She refuses to eat and then crawls into bed at the end of the day. Before Rest can offer some advice, Chaol shuts him down, and he wonders how everyone had found out about him and Celaena. Gee, we wonder.
I'm like, y'all were getting it on in a broom closet. You don't think someone knew?
Everybody knew. Okay.
Yeah.
So he then orders more guards to be posted outside her door, but that none of them are to stop her if she tries to leave. And this is because, although Chaol is still unsure of how they could possibly repair the relationship, if anybody is going to confront Celaena about what happened to Nehemia, he wants it to be him, which I appreciate. I agree, Chaol. It should be you. Rest then says, consider it done, before Chaol walks off for meetings and thinks about the fact that his father had summoned his southern lords to Rifthold, which includes his own father.
Yes.
Wonder what that's about.
Westfall family reunion.
Probably not a nice reunion.
No, I can tell you with 100% certainty it will not be happy.
But I want to know why they're being summoned. What is this meeting for?
Well, doesn't it say in the set of chapters that they did it because of the fallout with Eelway? It's created a lot of unrest. And so he's calling all the Southern Lords so they can figure out what their plan is.
Oh, that's right. Okay, because there was going to be a lot of debate and rage about Nehemia's death. Okay.
Well, and especially because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Eelway's to the south. So Eelway's reaction would most likely impact the Lords of the South first.
Oh, yeah. Southern Lords. Duh. Okay.
That's not explicitly stated, but I was like, oh, that's probably why.
No, yeah, you're totally right. I just hadn't thought that far into it. Anyways. Okay. So next we cut to Dorian's perspective, where he has several thoughts. First, he is frustrated by all the extra guards that follow him, and that many nobility had already left the castle out of fear. Second, Roland did not flee, although his mother did. And he has become more supportive of Dorian at council meetings than ever, including helping oppose more troops being sent to Eelway, and that the king should publicly apologize to Nehemia's family. Which, it's interesting, because again, what's Roland doing here? What's his plan?
I know he's kind of fallen out of this set of chapters. You're like almost starting to believe maybe he is not so bad, you know, but I don't know. I'm still suspicious.
I think it's going to get the rug's
going to be pulled out from underneath him. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Third, Dorian thinks about his own role and the type of man he would be if he blindly followed his father's command. Fourth, he recalls how he had no idea how he had stopped Celaena from stabbing Chaol. His thought was, it was like a phantom arm reached out from within him and wrapped around her wrist. He didn't know what he was doing. He just acted on gut feeling and desperation and need. We learn through Dorian's thoughts that he is aware that he needs to learn to control it, because the last thing he needs is for his power to manifest at a council meeting, perhaps. Now, I did note that he mentions his emotion of anger being involved with the magic, and I'm starting to feel that maybe emotions play a part in this, though we don't have confirmation of that, and we don't know how that would work at all either. And then the last part of Dorian's section is that he reflects on how Nehemia had known about his power and wonders if he will be able to learn anything since she is now gone.
Mm-hmm.
She was supposed to help him.
I know. I did like in this section of the chapter that there's a little bit of character development for Dorian. We had talked about this at the end of Throne of Glass, that he was starting to become more courageous and standing up to his father. You know, really thus far in Crown of Midnight, we haven't gotten a lot of Dorian's perspective, and what we have has all been wrapped up in what's going on with him power-wise. But I feel that he's gotten more bold in defying his father in council meetings. I especially like that he takes a stand when he wanted his father to publicly apologize to Nehemia's parents for her death. And of course, the king is outraged by this. But he says, Dorian had still written her parents a message expressing his deepest condolences. His father could go to hell for all he cared. And that was starting to be a problem, he realized as he sat in his tower and flipped through all the documents he had read before tomorrow's meeting with the Southern Lords. He had spent so long being careful to avoid defying his father, but what sort of man could he call himself if he blindly obeyed? So I think, again, this is just further evidence that Dorian is really starting to break the mold here and separate from his father, but also from the fear of standing up to him. And I'm very pleased by that. That makes me happy. It makes me like Dorian. I'm like, good for you. I hope that continues. And it kind of seems like it will.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just really like that.
I wonder how quickly things are going to develop for him. Just thinking about chapter 25 and that cryptic little message between the unknown princess and the queen. We suspected it was Dorian that they were talking about in terms of somebody getting the
he's not ready yet. Yeah, between the two of them, we thought it was Celaena and Dorian, and yes.
But I don't know. He seems like he may.
Yeah.
Well, he's working his way up there if he is the prince that they were talking about in that chapter. But
yeah,
I'm curious to see where his newfound courageousness goes.
I know. I hope it goes right in a dagger to the king's heart.
I hope so. I doubt it's going to be that obvious.
Yeah. I don't think he can be taken out by normal daggers.
Yeah, I also hope that nothing happens to Dorian, though.
Yeah,
because I'm sure the king does not like what he's seeing.
So I hope in this book we get a little bit of the king's perspective like we did at the end of Throne of Glass. I've been thinking about that. I'm like, we haven't gotten any perspective from really any of the villains in this story, not until this little part with Grave, and that's it.
Yeah, we know nothing. Just want to know. Okay. In the next part of this chapter, we are back with Celaena in her room, who has really only moved from the bed because Philippa insisted her sheets needed to be washed, which I thought was kind of funny. It's a little bit of comedic relief. But through Celaena's own reflections, she has pieced together who the assassin was. She believes this person was not involved with the king and wasn't one of Erwin's assassins either. The only person she can think to have committed this assassination in such a gruesome way was Grave. And again, I said this at the very beginning, but I just felt like it was a really random way to bring a character back. I mean, Grave is a piece of shit. He was a piece of shit in Throne of Glass, so it's on brand for his character, but I don't know. It was all just very bizarre to me.
Yeah. So I have to ask, before it is revealed in this chapter who is the killer of Nehemia, did you have an inkling about who it was?
I didn't know who it was specifically. I had some thoughts about it later in the next chapter when she actually confronts Grave, and Grave says, I was hired by somebody. So it wasn't just Grave making some kind of decision on his own to go do some crazy shit. Like, he was hired for a specific purpose.
Okay. I was just curious because the way that the bodies are described, and it's like they were slit from ear to ear and their insides were all cut open and mutilated. I'm like, that sounds really familiar. And then I remembered, it reminds me of how the bodies were in Throne of Glass.
Ridderak?
But I'm like, of course, that's a Ridderak. And I didn't think that the Ridderak was back, but it tickled something in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure it out. But then when they say Grave, I'm like, that's right. He did really creepy stuff, like really horrible, depraved stuff to his victims. I think that's meant to be like a little bit of a clue, but it's revealed so quickly. So it's not like this huge mystery that we try to solve. So then it's like, oh, whatever. But I was just curious if you were like, oh, I bet it was Grave.
I think like you had said initially before this chapter, I did have a similar inkling where I was like, oh, maybe it was some evil creature that had just, but turns out it was not. As Celaena thinks about Grave, we get a quote and it says, a familiar dark fire rippled in her gut, spreading through her, dragging her down into an abyss with no end. Obviously, based off this, we already know what she is about to go do. That's the end of chapter 34. And now we are ready for chapter 35, the final chapter.
Woo!
Celaena puts on her crime cloak because it's time for some midnight deeds. She goes down to Gavin and Elena's tomb, and as she walks by Mort, he tells her, I'm sorry to hear about your friend. Celaena, of course, ignores him and instead goes straight to the weapons. She stockpiles on knives and daggers, and she also grabs some gold and jewels before deciding that she is also going to take Damaris. Mort immediately tries to stop her, stating, that is a sacred sword. And when she ignores him again, he says, whatever you plan to do, you debase that sword by taking it from her. Aren't you afraid of angering the gods? Next, Celaena escapes out the sewer gate. She scales the wall to exit toward the city, and we learn that she is heading toward a place called the Vault, which is basically just a harbor for the worst of lowlives in Otterlin, realizing that stories of the assassination would surely be circulating there, and she would be able to get information about where Grave is. She also realizes that someone like Grave wouldn't leave Reptold, instead opting to stay where he can brag about his crime and recklessly spend his money. Once she gets to the vault, she heads down to the barkeeper, who recognizes her and asks how she escaped. She responds, you'll soon discover that, and then begins to inquire about Grave. The barkeeper says he doesn't know anything, and suddenly we found Grave. He takes off running because he's like, oh shit.
Because he's a little bitch.
Yeah, 100%. So
honestly, it's so annoying because in the set of the chapter with his perspective, he's like, I'm going to make her pay. She's going to wish she was never born. I'm going to take my sweet time. And all she did was walk into the room and say your name and you took off. So
that's
really,
what I was thinking.
Yeah, like, okay. He sucks for so many reasons, but that in particular, that's a lot of big talk for someone who literally took off running the moment that she entered the room.
He's all bark and no bite. So,
anyways. Ugh.
We, of course, shift to Graves' perspective, who had been celebrating his job, believing that he had gotten away with it. As he recalls her stepping into the tavern, he described her as looking more wraith than human, and that as he ran, he couldn't hear footsteps, but knew she was behind him, melting in and out of shadows and mist. This description stuck out to me because it is again evocative of these otherworldly ways that Celaena is described, especially when she's gone assassin mode, right?
She puts on her crime cloak.
When she puts on her crime cloak, exactly. Yeah. And honestly, I did actually Google what a wraith is because wraiths are mentioned pretty commonly in fantasy as some kind of creature of some sort. And I didn't actually know what it looked like, but it kind of looks like ghostly figure. It's got like a long dark cloak on. It doesn't really have a face really, but obviously it's kind of ominous and evil.
That is a very common description. There's a lot of descriptive language thus far about she melted in and out of the shadows. She used the shadows.
The shadows too.
Yeah. Of course, that's a great way to describe how an assassin moves, right? They blend into the night and the dark and all that. And it's just very descriptive language. But it does make me wonder if she does have some kind of, magic or something with shadows, especially because we know one of the books is called Queen of Shadows. So I'm kind of like,
remember, Nox had called her a Queen of the Shadows as well back in the OG.
I know.
Now, Grave, being a scummy piece of shit, really thinks he's just going to escape out of there and believes the royals had made a mistake in making her the champion. Then out of nowhere, his thought was she came through the fog, no more than a sliver of darkness. She didn't run. She just walked with that insufferable swagger. She continues advancing as Grave backs away, and he eventually backs himself into a wall and then attempts to strike her. But faster than he could follow, she ducked and slashed her sword across his shins. Again, just incredible speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's doing all of these things so fast that it seems inhuman. Celaena proceeds to pin him to the wall by his hands, which was honestly very gruesome to read.
I know. Yeah.
Him to the wall.
Just like that. And then it's described when he's like pulling against them. I'm like, oh my God. That hurts so bad. Like,
I don't want to think about it.
I don't really have a good stomach for violence, which of course I'm reading a book about a fucking assassin. So that's not very smart. But yeah, it's pretty gruesome.
I kind of tried to skip over some of the descriptive stuff because I was like, that's triggering my gag reflex. But
yeah.
Then, as Graves is sitting there pinned to the wall, he notes she crouches down with otherworldly silence and asks, "Who hired you?" He also notes there was nothing beneath the cowl, nothing of this world. She had no face.
Yes, I picked up from that too.
Very interesting.
Yes.
I want to know what Grave knows. There's something he's not telling us about her right now.
No, he doesn't know anything.
He doesn't know anything, but I'm talking about like the way that he's describing her. I feel like there's something else that he doesn't share with us because we as the reader can't know yet about Celaena.
Oh,
like,
okay.
Everything's revealed about her, but I feel like he sees something about her.
Okay.
Anyways, Grave, of course, refuses to answer, which earns him more pain. And just as she is about to cut off one of his fingers, he buckles and screams, "Don't, I'll tell you everything." And then the chapter ends.
I think Grave is so stupid. The moment that she pinned you to the wall, I'd be like, I'll just tell you whatever you want to know. It's so dumb that he's like, what are you talking about? Oh, I have gold. Look at her. She looks like death herself. Do you really think that you're going to get out of this? If that were me, I would just be like, what do you want to know? And is there any chance that I can get out of this? If not, can you just make it a quick death? You know, like
That's
just
right.
Minimize my pain, but not Grave.
Better yet,
nope.
He could have just taken himself out, but no.
Oh, yeah.
He's a little coward, so.
He is a fucking coward. He really is.
I hope that she killed him. I'm assuming she did, but.
I can assure you that she did.
Mostly because he deserved everything that she did to him. I have a lot of questions. I want to know about Celaena, as usual.
Know. Me too. I just want to finish this freaking book.
All right. That concludes our analysis, and it is now time for our favorite moments. Addison, what were your favorite moments from this set of chapters?
Okay, so I had a few. I like when Chaol has been kidnapped and he first overhears and realizes that they're waiting on Celaena to come. And there's this little conversation he exchanges with the guard. And Chaol says, "I don't think you realize who you're dealing with." And the man responds, "If you were that good, you would be more than captain of the guard." Chaol says, "I wasn't talking about me." The man says, "She's just one girl." And then Chaol says, "Then you're really in for a surprise." I just thought that was really funny because, of course, we know that as the readers. And so you're like, oh, baby, you are in for the shock of your fucking life. You really underestimated the wrong fucking person. And then I love when she is breaking in to get Chaol and she thinks she'd been called Otterland's assassin for a reason. Dramatic entrances were practically her art form. And that's just so Celaena, just so cocky really and just like assassinating with a flair, you know? So.
Yeah. And she does. She busts through that window and it's flying immediately.
Yes, it's a really cool action sequence in the way it's described. It's like before she even made it through the window, daggers flew and you're like, yeah, that's so cool.
Yep.
And then in that same scene, when one of the cloaked figures with the ancient voice says, "Enough, we have enough enemies as it is. There are worse things out there to face." And she says, No, there aren't, because I'm here now. And I was like, damn, she had a lot of great moments in this set of chapters that I really liked.
I like her as an assassin.
Me too. I'm here for it, honestly. It's a little scary, but I'm here for it. What were your favorite moments?
I, like you, also really liked just the whole Chaol rescue scene because it was really action-packed, and we haven't seen a ton of action so far from Celaena in assassin mode. And we get this one, and then we also get the one with Graves. So a lot of cool action. I really liked it.
About time.
Yes. I mean, she just obliterates everybody so fast, too. It's wild. I also liked when she's sitting in her room after she's brought out of this prison cells, and it says that she had really only moved from the bed because Philippa insisted her sheets needed to be washed.
Oh, really?
I thought I interpreted it funny because I feel like that was Philippa's way of trying to get her moving and stuff. And the way I read it was kind of funny. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be funny, but I read it with a tone of comedic relief. So,
see, it made me sad because right after that, she says when she remembered who she'd last shared that bed with, she wanted all traces of him gone.
I know.
And so then I was like, oh, that actually made me sad.
Oh, okay. Well,
oops, sorry. I didn't mean to rain on your parade.
I know. Well, my next one's not like happy or anything. So my last one is the chapter with the Ilway slave girl. It was the last part of page 250 when it said, silently she began to recite the names of her dead, and as the overseer raised his whip, she added her name to the end of that list and swung her axe into his gut.
Yes. So impactful. I believe that whole chapter is really good.
I know, it was so short, but excellent chapter. So,
yeah, I agree.
All right. That concludes our episode. Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we would love to hear your thoughts. So please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, or share it with all your friends who love fantasy fiction as well. You can also keep up with us on a daily basis by following us on social media. All of those are linked below in the episode description. Stay nerdy, everyone, and we'll catch you next week for Crown of Midnight, episode 6. Bye!
Bye!
I think the dogs are like making noise and stuff, so I just want to make sure
someone's jingling there.
That was Ernie.
Ernie. It's always Ernie. Well, no, Kellis will always be burping.
I know.
I actually got out my handy dandy ebook and I Googled this phrase. I searched this phrase in the book.
Maybe she was literally bestowed at Yule Mass. Or Yule Miss, sorry, not Yule Mass.
Yule Mass.
Yule Mass.